listeners, Alan here, and I'm reading Think and Grow Rich at the moment. And in chapter 2, there's an incredible story. Incredible story. And I, as someone who has kids, can kind of feel his pain a little bit. But also I can't. I think unless you're in that situation, you can't really know the immense pain of something like this happening to somebody. When his son was born, when his son was born, he was born with no ears. And not only was he born with no ears, he was born with inside the ear, the equipment, I don't know the medical term, I'm sorry, I don't know the medical term, the equipment or what needs to be there in order to hear wasn't even there. The eardrum or whatever else it's called, I don't know what the medical term for it is. But I'm going to call it the eardrum. The eardrum wasn't there. And he's also born with no ears now. I kind of can, to some extent, imagine that pain now. But also, a large part of me can't, because I haven't been in that situation. And this is something that a lot of parents have to deal with. Not that specific thing, but something happening during birth that you didn't really plan for. And you love your kids, no matter what, you love your kids. But there's also some mourning for the life that child could have had. So it's painful. It's painful. As I read this story about this kid who's born with no ears and no eardrum, I was feeling that pain, the parents' pain. And I can't even imagine the issues or the challenges that the child has. He went to a normal school, and it must have been incredibly difficult for the teachers, but also incredibly difficult for the child. How do you socialize? How do you converse with other kids? He also was deaf and dumb. He couldn't hear or speak for a long time. And how do you have friends? How do you even understand what the hell's going on in the class? So difficult, very, very difficult. And until you're in that exact situation, you can't understand that pain. Although we all have pain, we all have difficult things that we didn't plan for. A parent dies, a child dies, my own brother came very close to death not too long ago, and he is partially paralyzed now, and that's incredible pain that he has to go through. And we don't plan for these things. We don't see these things coming. Why would you plan for something like that? It's not the way you expect your life to go. But it's an unbelievable story. Really read it. If you ever read this book, just read chapter 2. If you just don't want to read the whole book, read chapter 2. It's incredibly inspiring, but also incredibly painful to read about. And what he said is, from the moment his child was born with no ears and no eardrum, not able to speak for many, many years and not able to hear, he always spent a lot of time with that child, and also told him a lot of stories. And every story he told him contained in it the idea that his not being able to speak and not being able to hear was going to become his greatest asset in his life. Now, he didn't know how it was going to, but he wanted to plant that idea in that boy's mind. And he also always wanted to give him the same opportunities as his other kids. So when his oldest kid got to, I don't know what it was, let's say 13, 14, he began selling papers. And he wanted to give that same opportunity to his second child, who was born with no ears and no eardrums. And he did it. And he also implanted a self-reliance in this child as he grew up. Now, this is 80 years ago. I understand this to some extent because when I was 14, I sold newspapers. That was my job when I was 14. I sold newspapers. And there is a certain self-reliance, particularly at that age when you're making your own money and being able to spend your own money that you've made. It hasn't been handed to you. You worked for this money and you're spending your own money. And I don't want to ruin the whole story for you, but just to say that buy the book, or you can get it on Audible, get the audiobook on Audible. I usually do both because I listen to an Audible and I also like to mark up the book as I'm going through it as well. But in the end, he found a way for the child to hear. It was through resonance, through your bone. There can be certain resonances through your bone where you can actually hear what's going on without actually hearing the sound vibration. You actually hear the vibration through your bones. And he found it an incredible way for him to begin to hear, and it opened up a whole new world for him. But he also spent the rest of his life helping other people who couldn't hear. And he worked with a company, he worked on the marketing of a company who created devices for people who couldn't hear. So in the end, his greatest detriment to him, the fact that he had no eardrums, he couldn't hear, became his greatest asset, and also allowed him to give to the world, which I think is why we're all here at the end of the day. Sooner or later, we're here to give something to the world. And at least the way this boy was born, it gave him a very clear picture of what he was here to give to the world. And we're all here to give something to the world. I don't know what your thing is, but it was very clear to this boy what he was here to do, the work he was here to do on the earth. And he was able to do it. So his greatest detriment became his greatest asset and gave him the ability to give so much to the world. It's an incredible story. I really think you should read it. This has been Alan here from Looking for Warriors. Think and Grow Rich.